We're not defined by our adversity. We're defined by our actions in the face of adversity. And that's what all my time in Special Forces proved to me. Because it's not about what happens to us that matters. It's about what we choose to do about what happens to us. That is the difference maker. And that could be the difference between life and death. But that decision to commit, to sacrifice, and go all in, that was made long before the warrior ever stepped foot on a battlefield. And you can find real liberation when you commit like that, because it comes with the potential to learn, grow, serve, and love without the fear of failure or of death. Now, the first time that truth revealed itself to me was way back when on my first day of football practice in the 4th grade. Now, a bit of a backstory. My dad, who's in the audience, is this big individual. And that big stature was transferred on to his children. So when I'm in the 4th grade, guess what? I'm the biggest 4th grader. Now, this football league I was signed up for, they didn't just go by age and grade back then. They also went by how much you weighed. So being the biggest 4th grader, well, that put me into a league that was made up of all 6th graders. Now, the psychological difference, I think we can all agree, between a 4th grader and a 6th grader is pretty significant. And that big gap, well, only gets magnified kind of that much more when you're thrust into the physical arena of a contact sport. So that first day when I showed up, I was terrified because I had no confidence. I was uncertain, unsure of myself. I was timid. According to my dad, when it came time to tackle, well, I wasn't doing well. But worse than that, as he saw it, when it came time to run at the end, purely an effort drill, I was the last to cross the finish line every time. Will Durant wrote that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. Dad came and he found me after that practice and he said, "Son, I was watching you out there." I went and I found the man in charge, and he's told me he'll give me my money back because I'm not going to pay for you to come out here or go anywhere and not put forth your best attitude and your best effort. See, Dad was old school, so to help that to solidify, to fire and wire in my brain, Dad had me run from the practice field to our home over 2 miles away in full cleats, pads, helmet, next to the driver's side of the car with the window rolled down as Dad encouraged me to put forth a better attitude and effort next time out. Now, before anybody wants to go call the Child Protective Services or get all bent out of shape, the next practice, without any change to my underlying physiology, when it came time to tackle, I started laying kids out 2 years older than me. And when it came time to run, one practice, I went from being last every time to being first. So if there was no supernatural intervention, you might ask yourself, well, hey man, what was the difference maker? Well, it's what my dad was unwittingly attempting to drive home, which was to face and confront my fear, to charge courageously into the unknown, and to act in a difficult situation with the best attitude and the best effort I could bring forward. And that followed me into Special Forces, where I had become an elite performer in situations of life and death. That level of commitment by those types of individuals, that requires you to come face to face with the fact that when the time comes, and it will come, that we won't hesitate to sacrifice and lay down our own life, if need be, in pursuit of a mission, a purpose, a meaning that serves something greater than the individual. That allows us to contribute and to perform at the pinnacle of our abilities. But that lifestyle, a career spent enduring explosive concussive blast wave after explosive concussive blast wave, caught up with me. I started to suffer the many symptoms of what we now know were multiple minor traumatic brain injuries. Now, minor, only in the sense it didn't put me in a field hospital, an emergency room, like a gunshot, a missing limb, or eye would have. That made it very difficult for myself, my family, the outside world to understand, like, what happened to you, man? How do you go from this high-stakes performer to having your life come undone? There's not a scratch on your body. See, I got back from my last combat deployment in 2013, and I'll tell you why that's significant in a moment. But as I got back on American soil, arriving at the airport where I met my oldest son for the first time, I was injury and symptom-free, or so we thought. These invisible head injuries sustained in combat would lead to a very long list of serious medical problems. But we now know you don't even have to be knocked unconscious to receive a head injury. In my career, I was knocked out once, and it was brief. And I came to from an explosion to find rocket-propelled grenades coming and exploding in close proximity, bullets whizzing and flying by. My team was depending on me with their lives to do my job. So I woke up, I got up, and I went back to work. And with our current level of operational tempo, we didn't have the luxury to sit around and dwell on things like that after the fact. But what I'm about to describe, it occurred very rapidly in a very short time span. So like I said, I returned 0 significant injuries, 0 symptoms, to being medically retired from the Army, where I was labeled as 100% service-connected disabled. Now I'm on the street, and my head's spinning, and I'm wondering, how am I supposed to provide for my wife and 5 children like this, all in about 18 months' time? So here are just some of the things that can manifest without there being a visible injury on your body. I had this blood clot, and it broke off from my leg, and it traveled to both lungs, and I was told that I would have to remain on blood-thinning medication for the rest of my life. I was diagnosed with having a mood disorder with depression, anxiety, photophobia, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorder with depressed mood, reaction to chronic stress, chronic fatigue syndrome, neurocognitive disorder, and insomnia, to name just the tip of the iceberg. Now, U.S. Army Special Forces, they spend a lot of time, money, and effort identifying and cultivating a very specific type of individual who can thrive under the psychological and physical stressors of combat. So what did not sit well with me were all these newly found psychological diagnoses, because I wasn't hung up on anything I had done operationally. I wasn't looking to get out of deployment. I didn't want a free ticket on the outside. What I wanted was my life back, to get back to doing what I knew I was put here to do. But now I'm overcome with this newfound depression, and it doesn't add up, because I'm living the life I want to live as a Special Forces operator. I'm married to the woman of my dreams. We have the family we'd always hoped for, but yet I'm now swimming in this newfound sea of depression. The answer for that will put you on an antidepressant, and we'll take that dosage up to the highest point of the dosing ceiling to have what was called treatment-resistant depression. I'm starting to think, man, I'm losing my mind, because I'm caught now in this constant state of anxiety and fight or flight, and it has these fists just coming through my stomach at all times. The answer for that will put you on 2 anti-anxiety medications. We'll take that into the farthest end of the dosing spectrum to continue to have panic attacks. So here I am, this Green Beret, I'm having panic attacks now in public, in front of my family, in the weight room. Nowhere was off limits. And it was like somebody had turned on this faucet of tears, because unprovoked, uncontrollably, I just start crying, and I couldn't stop it. I'm supposed to be this high-functioning Special Forces guy. What are we paid to do? Make difficult decisions in life and death situations. And now I can't even stop myself from crying in public. So at this point, I know I've gone insane, because I've been all over the country to see a number of specialized doctors. I've been put on a multitude of medications, and the only thing that seems to be doing is to make my life worse. So the only thing I knew to do in that condition was to drink. Got so out of control, my wife, 9 months pregnant, had to ask me, "Could you keep your drinking down today? I'm going into labor, and I'm not going to be able to drive myself to the hospital." It didn't get better from there. It was like this 18-wheeler Mack truck going down the mountain with the brakes out. But all those problems that I spoke of earlier, what they really should have called it was like, hey, you know what? Here's your new life sentence. Because it didn't come with any resolutions. It didn't come with any solutions. It was just like, here's your new problems. And because you have these problems, we can no longer use your highly developed skill set and services. But before you hit the door, here, boom, here's a bag of double-digit medication to take for the rest of your life. I was sinking in this pitch-black abyss. I couldn't see a way out. And for the first time ever I started to become consumed by what I thought were unfair circumstances. I thought the system was massively mistreating me and that nobody could understand or relate to me in the position that I was in. Because of the injuries, I had lost my ability to remain a Special Forces operator my entire identity. And because of that, I thought I would never regain any purpose or meaning to my life. I remember conveying all that very difficult information to my parents over the phone, and I can only imagine what that must have been like for them, especially being a parent myself. But my dad hit me with some real truth. He said, "Son, I can't understand everything it is you've been through, and I know that you're hurting, but if you could find a way to make your life, to make your new mission in life about helping somebody else, I think you'll find that would be able to help you." And in my current condition, I didn't have the ability to action that just yet. But sometimes we need a wake-up call to wake up. My moment of truth, it didn't come in the form of a gunshot wound or any of the consequences of the blasts I was in or around, or even some very practical advice from my father. It came instead from my wife and I being devastated at the pain and the suffering we watched our 13-month-old boy endure, and to just feel helpless to do anything for him about it. So I remember being with him at one of the top children's hospitals where he just had a very serious operation to remove that massive growth there in his neck. And as he's recovering in the ICU and I'm there with him, I come to this clarity, this moment of understanding where my life's at this crossroads and it was going to go one of two ways. I could continue on the same path I was on, the path that conventional medicine had laid out in front of me, the one I kept blaming for all my problems. But as I looked down at my boy, I realized that I was of no value to him or my family in the condition that I was in. The only place I was headed was towards an early grave. No longer an option. So the other option, as I saw it, was to revert back to my most foundational level of training, to embrace this current level of pain, but this time to channel it correctly and to act on it, to improve my situation. And though at that time I had a short-circuiting brain and a malfunctioning body, I came to understand that we all have this gift inside of us. It allows us to choose how we receive, internalize, and respond to life. I vow to never become a victim to my circumstance again. I've always subscribed to the principle that if you don't like it, you fix it. The level of care I'd been receiving through the system was a series of mind-bending Band-Aids that didn't work. Well, why didn't they work? Because they didn't identify, nor did they treat the underlying condition. Well, then what did they do? In my case, it masked symptoms, which only further made the problems worse. See, I didn't have a mental health issue. I had a brain health issue. And when I finally got outside of myself for a moment, and I came up for air and took a look around, I realized this isn't special or specific to me like I thought it was. I observed this problem running rampant like the plague through the whole community. So right there, next to my son's hospital bed, I promised my boy and myself three things. One, I would return to the man of my pre-injury status. Two, I would find a way to come off all this medication. Let me tell you, I didn't care what I had to do, where I had to go, who I had to see, how much money it cost, how long it took, or what anybody else had to say about it, because in my mind, those two things, non-negotiable. And once they were accomplished, number three was to turn around and to help somebody else do the exact same thing. So what I once thought was the worst thing in my life has now turned out to be one of the best. Because if the same actions produce the same results, and they do, this crossroads decision set, it put me in a new line of time, a new mode of thinking, new actions which led to and produced new results. And though I was forced to be medically retired from the Army, told point blank, hey, nobody comes back from head injuries like yours. Today, I'm symptom and medication free. I'm performing as good, if not better, than my pre-injury status. I don't need alcohol to cope with the consequences of life. And because of that, my wife and I will celebrate 11 years of marriage this next year, this month. My boy Jace there in the red shirt is as happy and as healthy as a young boy could possibly be, and we just upped our family count of 7 up to an arsenal of 9, throwing those twin boys into the mix last year as well. I went on to follow my father's very wise advice, and my brother and I co-founded an organization that's now brought this same level of care and healing that I've received to thousands of others, both directly and indirectly, with very similar and repeatable results as my own. Though I was labeled with a neurocognitive disorder, amongst many other things, I went on to complete the Stanford Graduate School of Business's Ignite program. I'm finishing up my MBA at Pepperdine University. Adam and I co-authored a best-selling book on our work and our experiences, which has now been turned into a full-feature documentary titled Quiet Explosions, due out next year, by a 2-time Emmy Award-winning director, and we had a 3-time Academy Award winner also on the team. Now, I say all of that to get to and to say this. It's not the diagnosis, the prognosis, or what anybody else says or thinks about it. That doesn't matter. People love to tell you how and why you can't do something. And if you stop and you think about that, you're going to find 101 really good reasons why you can't. So what? It's hard out there for all of us, but we're the ones who get to choose. Victim or Victor, author of Man's Search for Meaning, Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl wrote that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. My suffering, it turns out, in large part, was self-inflicted, because there's nothing special or unique about pain, suffering, or loss. That's the human condition of lived experience, the rule rather than the exception for all of us, because it's not about what happens to us that matters. It's about what we choose to do about what happens to us. That is the difference maker. And history has shown that the difference makers through time were not defined by their adversity. They drew a line in the sand. They courageously stepped into the unknown, and they chose to be defined by their vision and their actions in the face of adversity in the most difficult and trying of circumstance. So my challenge to us all today is, what attitudes, what actions can we choose to define our lives? And how can we use those actions to better serve the world, to create and to be the difference we want to see? Dio presso liber. Thank you all.